Mm.
All right, Mel, we're live. So
Yeah.
thank you for joining. Thanks for making the time. For anyone that is kind of new to your world, like we've known each other for a while and I connected with you through your DOTS workshop. So who are you as a person, but also who are you as like a DOTS woman? Tell me all about you.
Of course, hi. Who am I as a person? I would like to think of myself as refreshingly honest, but also um, fascinated in people. And I love to chat. I love to have deep, meaningful conversations. And I kind of seek out people that are like that as well. I'm the kind of person that will sit down at a gathering of some kind and just talk about the meaning of life and why are we here and all those kind of conversations. So I love just hearing real stuff from people, like what's really going on, what keeps you up at night, what do you love, all that kind of thing. um and I, as you said, I run the dots training, so I kind of coach people in, it's like an advanced or like a next level people skill, I suppose. And I help people understand why we think and act the way we do, which is, I suppose, why I'm fascinated in all that. Why are we the way we are? What makes us tick? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What do we love? What stresses us out? All that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit of me. And I'm a mum of two girls now, which has opened up a whole new realm of being fascinated in why we are the way we are and watching them grow and develop their personalities. And that's, I've been loving um, witnessing all that. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, really.
Yeah, and we had to talk about putting a time limit on this podcast because otherwise you and I can just yarn for years. So tell us a little bit about what DOTS is, like the cliff notes of the DOTS training.
Essentially, it's something called precognitive communication training, which is essentially knowing how your words will be received by someone else before you start talking. So, kind of um, the science behind why someone says something a certain way, that kind of thing. So, it's a communication style training. It talks about the four different communication styles, the four dots, we call them, the four different colors: purple, yellow, red, and blue. It helps you determine what your communication style is, the way that you interpret information and the way that you speak to others, and how that colors all your conversations with anyone. And then the real crux of it is how to understand others who are different to you, who interpret life differently to you, and how to get along with them better by knowing how your words will be received before you even open your mouth. That's why we kind of call it like a next level of understanding. Is, if you have an argument with someone, or a conversation doesn't go the way you thought it would or the way you planned, why is that? Why did that trigger them, or why did they take that a different way? It might not just be that they are difficult or that you don't get along with them. It might just be that you're on slightly different wavelengths and you're not speaking their language. So essentially, yeah, that's what we teach people about the four dots, which are kind of like the four different languages, and how to speak the other three languages that you are not dominant in, and it's not as familiar to you.
Mm.
It's quite cool.
It's so powerful. Like communication really is the backbone of our lives because it's how we relate to each other, right? And whether it's like the words we say or the words we don't say, and our body language, there's so much that goes into our experience of life through our relationships. And communication really is like the backbone of
Mm.
those relationships, right? What I find so fascinating about the dots and like what you do is not only does it help you actually understand yourself, but it really helps you understand everyone else. Like the flow on effect is just this like grand emotional IQ. And it's so fascinating to get to know yourself better through your triggers or your communication style or kind of the way that you see the world. But you start to notice, like, it's crazy that we can be summed up into kind of these 4 categories. And I think the human brain likes to be categorized, right? So if anyone wants to know what dot they are, and you're like, what are these ladies talking about? Like, I'll drop the quiz in the show notes, but it's just such a nice way to get to know yourself. And what are your thoughts on that? Like, about how we end up being defined and categorized, and as like boxed in as it sounds, it's almost freeing. I hope that's making sense. Like, what do you think of that?
That's a really good point, that like some people, there's always certain people that don't like to be categorized or don't want to be put in a box, or they want to feel unique and different, and that's completely fine. That I love that. But it's interesting that it's just like when I mentioned about languages, it's not so much of just being put in a box or just you're the same as everyone else. It's more starting to feel comfortable in your own skin and realizing you're not alone and not the only person that operates that way. And we all have things that we can relate to and that kind of thing. And I think like we often refer to the dots as languages because it's like if you were in France and you wanted to have a conversation with someone and you walked up to them and you can only speak and understand English and they can only speak and understand French, how are you going to talk to them? How are you going to get along with them? How are you going to have any kind of interaction? You might use signs and your hands and things like that. You might yell, you might try and point at things, but at the end of the day, the only way you're ever going to actually be able to have a conversation is if one of you learns the other's language and starts to speak it. And if I realize that that person's speaking French and I start speaking French to them, that doesn't change who I am and that doesn't make me French as well. I can still be who I am, but I'm just learning a different language so that we can relate to each other and get along better and actually understand each other. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we categorize the different styles, is it just gives you kind of a language to understand people and a way to also depersonalize a lot of conflict that comes. You mentioned relationships before. Like I know that there are so many unnecessary relationship breakdowns that we see every single day. Marriages end, teams fall apart, friendships break apart, that kind of thing. A lot of them can be avoided if we just understood why that person is the way they are. And then like there's so many misunderstandings that happen naturally that we don't even realize are happening. And I find it fascinating. Like my partner and I dated back in high school when we were much younger, and we broke up after a few years, as you do, young teenagers. And we got back together about 10 years later. We're together now. We've had 2 kids together. I do not think we would be together still if I didn't understand his style and he didn't understand mine, because we are almost polar opposites. And there are so many times where I get so frustrated with him or he gets frustrated with me and we're just not seeing eye to eye. The moment we realize, okay, he's a red dot, or I'm being extra blue dot today, it just makes it less stressful, and it gives us something to kind of communicate what's going on rather than just he's being a whatever. It's actually he's
Say
speaking
it.
red and I'm
Say
speaking blue, and that's why we're not vibing today, is we're in a whole different ball game. And having that language to understand that makes it so much easier to get along. And yeah, I don't think I would find it very hard now, knowing what I know, to go back to, if we didn't have those skills, I don't know how we would make it work. You can, but it's a lot. You'd have a lot more arguments and a lot more stress and a lot more misunderstanding without even knowing it. Like you wouldn't even know that that's why that's going on. You'd just think that that person is difficult, or it's not meant to be. But sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's actually you're just speaking different languages. That's all it is.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting that like it's not, I mean, it's not easy, but it's a simple kind of skill to learn, right? Like very hard to practice emotional awareness and practice empathy and understanding and actually try to understand someone else. But this probably seems like a really odd topic to talk about, given that I work in like the health and fitness space. But I'm always stressing to my clients, like our relationships, whether that's romantic, whether that's our work relationships, whether that's our family relationships, the influence that other people can have on your health and your decisions is massive. And the communication there too, like I can't tell you how many women I speak to that are like, I really want to start looking after myself better and I want to start cooking these healthier meals, but my husband loves to drink every night and it's so hard not to want to have a glass of wine with him or something. And so it seems like communication and health and fitness on paper look very far apart, but when you actually have the skills to communicate like your goals and your desires and understand other people's goals and desires too, like it kind of creates a bit of it takes away the friction in a way and just creates like this opportunity to like communicate better, right?
I think that's actually such a good point that I read something the other day that said the person you choose to partner with, if you so do, like the person you choose to be in an intimate relationship with is one of the most important decisions of your entire life, because that's not just that person. I think it's like, is it so many tens of thousands of meals, like a meal partner you're going to have, a person you're going to sit down and eat with so many times for the rest of your life, a person you're going to vacation with, a person you're going to possibly parent with, like going to have so many conversations and so many experiences with this person. So it's so important to be aware of their needs, your needs, be able to communicate that, because you're going to spend a lot of time with that person. And if you don't, like I have to, even, doing this training and living and breathing it every single day, I always have to keep reminding myself how to kind of step into his shoes or get him to step into mine constantly. And it's the same like with people you work with as well, like your boss or your colleagues. Like you spend a lot of time with them. If you don't know how they want to be treated or they don't know how you like to be treated, it's like you're walking around in the dark or you're blindfolded and you're just guessing and hoping, and every now and again things go right, but every now and again they don't. And if you're not aware of why, it can make it so much harder. And so something I have to do all the time, even actually just a couple of days ago, I was feeling quite stressed about something and I had to actually say to my partner, because he was trying to help in his own way. So he was asking for information and he was giving me facts and he was giving me figures and he was, trying to analyze the
Like
situation. And
logic it.
yeah, logic. And I looked at him and I was like, I don't need this right now. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm trying to help you. Like, you want me to help you? This is me helping you. I said, no, no, no. I need support, like emotional support right now. I am stressed out. Logic is not going to get me out of this. I need to feel like you have my back and I need you to kind of support me as a partner. You're not my boss. You're not my business associate. You are my partner and I want to feel supported. And he was looking at me like I was an alien. Like he was just like, what are you talking about? This is me supporting you. But he thought and like bless him, like he was trying to help in the way he would want to be helped. So he wasn't even doing anything wrong as such. It was just, I'm trying to support you how I would want to be supported, but that's not what I needed in that moment. So I had to remind him, hey, I get what you're trying to do. It's not working for me. It's having the opposite impact. It's stressing me out more. What I really need right now is a hug. And I need you to say, hey, like you can't solve this problem for me. But I can be here with you and help you feel less alone. And like, yeah, I was like, you're not going to be able to solve this problem. I just need to feel supported. And if I wasn't able to do that, like I think it's so important to do that, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a workplace or a family, being able to tell people what you need without offending them. Like it's not that you're ungrateful for their attempt, but being able to communicate, hey, this is actually what I need in this moment, and it might be different to you. then it helps them as well, because then they're like, oh, okay, there's no point wasting time and energy on something that's not working. Let's try something else. And I think that's so important with the people we spend the most time with. Make sure that they are aware of what you need and you know what they need, and you can actually just say that and remind them if you need to.
I'm interested to know your thoughts on, like, hearing you say that. I can only admit it's difficult when you have like this level of awareness around, you know, communication styles and reading the room basically, but also knowing yourself and being able to say, hey, this is actually what I need. Because I know a lot of people, when they get like that, they don't even know what they need, right? I'm curious to know your thoughts around like the kind of people that would listen to this and go, but I just want him to read my mind. Do I have to tell him? You know, what are your thoughts? Like,
That's such a brilliant one, because mind reading, like, I remember when we first got back together, my partner and I, one of the things he said to me once, he doesn't like, he won't play games, right? So he's very upfront, he's very honest, he's very direct. So I would often, without meaning to, but I would push him away subconsciously to see whether he'd come back. It was almost like I would test him, like, without, like, I didn't sit down and go, I'm going to test him today. It was more like if we were getting in an argument, my defense mechanism was to push him away and be like, no, this, that was safe for me to walk away, and protect myself. And so I'd be like, leave, go, da da da. And he would look at me and he'd say, look, is that what you really want? Because I'm going to take you at your word. Like, if you want me to leave, I will leave. If you want me to stay, ask me to stay. Like, don't tell me, I will say, I will do what, like, I will do.
don't play games.
Yeah, don't play games. And I remember thinking, ooh, okay. Because I didn't want him to leave. I didn't want him to, but I wanted him to know I was upset. And that was the only way I kind of knew how to communicate that. So it's interesting. I think when you don't know what you want, to just get curious. Like, it's hard in the moment. Like, if I'm really upset or really angry, I'm not going to necessarily sit there and self-reflect in that moment. But afterwards I can, like, once I've calmed down and things have settled, the dust has settled, I'll sit down and write. I'll write out everything going on in my head, or I'll talk to someone, like a friend or something like that, and just be like, that was interesting. Why did that upset me so much? What was really going on there? And I'll kind of like pick it apart. Like, I'll sit there and just be like, okay, what worked? What didn't? That didn't go how I thought. That's interesting. Why is that? And then I'll kind of work through it. And then when I've got a clearer head, so that next time it happens, it's like this light bulb turns on. I'm like, oh, okay, that's right. That happened last time too. Interesting. And then the more I do it, the more I can catch myself in the moment, and it gets easier and easier. You just got to kind of practice it. But I think it's funny, yeah, in the moment, you don't necessarily think, because your brain changes when you're upset and you're angry, and things close down, and you're not operating at your best self. But when you get back to operating at your best self, it's interesting to reflect back and learn lessons from what worked and what didn't in that moment.
Yeah, the pause is it's what I call it. Like, particularly when I'm talking to clients about emotional eating, is like, your brain is not working the way that your best self wants it to work when you're emotional and irrational. And trying to logic yourself out of it can sometimes be helpful, but often isn't, because we don't need to approach emotional situations with logic. We need emotional solutions for emotional problems. And so in the context of, like you say, if you're like upset and you're trying to ask someone for what you want, actually just taking a pause and figuring out, what the hell do I want, is kind of the first thing. Like, the eating example is another one. We tend to just like reach for what's comfortable. You're going to push the man away. You're going to like nosedive the fridge. You're going to, I don't know, like scroll out of, avoiding whatever it is out here. It's like, I'll just go to what's comfortable. Like, we are programmed for comfort. We're not programmed for discomfort. We're not programmed to learn about ourselves and like build this we've learned to like survive, and it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? What a privilege we actually have to have a conversation about this, because it does mean that like our basic needs are met, you know, our food, our water, our shelter. And at the very top of that, you're aware of like Maslow's
Yes,
yeah, and then right at the top is like exploring consciousness, which is kind of what we're doing. And it's like we got to remember, when we get into those emotional places, we're not operating from a place where we can like contemplate life. We feel threatened. And whether it's true or not, because someone said something mean, or your partner ignored this, or something at work happened, it triggers those basic needs of comfort and survival. And that's when we tend to like lash out, and we tend to overeat, and we tend to like self-sabotage, basically.
Yeah, hard out. I was just thinking that very much when you're in survival mode, working on yourself and self-reflection and all that kind of takes a back seat. So I think that's why it's so important. But we often don't work on improving things until something goes wrong. We kind of assume everything's fine, and then, you know, when something actually, it's not until something actually happens that we think, oh, I need to fix this now. But if you can get more curious and become more self-aware when you are, you know, level-headed or, you know, thinking clearly, then when those moments happen, which they inevitably will, we will experience moments of survival and moments of threat and all that kind of thing. You're way more equipped to deal with it. You've done the work, and you've got the skills and the tools to help in those moments. And I think that's so important, because like I was in survival mode for probably the last 3 years with having young children and sleep deprivation and, you know, the hormones going crazy and all that kind of thing. That was very much, I just need to make it through the day. Like I just need to get through the day, get through the night, and then I'll survive another day. Whereas now we're sleeping better and eating better, and life is a bit more, you know, a bit calmer. I can actually now work on bettering myself and improving myself. And I just think curiosity is one of the best tools we can use, is just get curious. Like, yeah, why did that happen? Like, why did I eat that? Or, you know, did I need that? Or what went on there? And then get curious about it. Don't judge it. Don't, you know, don't make it bad or wrong or anything like that. Just get curious. Like, what caused that to happen? And I do that all the time. Like if I can almost, it's like I'm watching myself now in third person. If I'm having an argument, sometimes I can almost step back and be like, that's interesting. Why am I getting so angry about that? Like I'll sometimes I'll laugh, which can make it worse, because then they think you're, but I'll be like, wow, okay, why am I so angry right now? Am I actually just hungry, or is there something else going on? And this has been really helpful, because my partner and I used to argue a lot when alcohol was involved. So if I had had a few drinks, particularly more me than him, because he's not much of a drinker at all. If I had had a few drinks, sometimes I would start picking fights with him, and he hated it. Like he would just like switch off, and he wouldn't even, he's like, I don't even want to talk to you because you're not, I know you've had a few wines and I can tell how many wines you've had by what kind of things you're saying. And it was
There's
really
levels.
not,
There's
yeah, like
levels
he's
of
like,
wine.
this is 3 wine, Mel. And like, and it was really not good for our relationship, because, and I realized, because I got curious about it, I was like, why is this happening? Why do I keep, and I kept making it him. I was like, no, he's the problem. He's the, but then I realized, because there was stuff I wasn't dealing with when I was sober, or we would have an argument and not quite resolve it. And then once I had a few wines, it loosened my tongue, and all that stuff would come out in the worst way possible, like all at once. It would just be bleh. And he'd be like, whoa, what the hell's going on? But I needed to actually address it at the time, rather than, so now like I can have a wine or two and we, nothing, if there's nothing going on, we're fine. But if there's something going on that I've been suppressing, it'll come out, and not in the best way. So it's better to address it when I'm in a clear frame of mind than let it, you know, fester. And it will come out one way or another. And people do that too, even without alcohol. They'll bottle it up, and then they'll explode over something completely random that didn't warrant that level of reaction. And then the other person starts thinking they're crazy. They're like, what's going on? Why are you so upset over a broken glass or something? Like, but it's not that. It was actually stuff from the last 10 weeks that they'd been suppressing, and it's just all come out all at once.
Oh my God, and I just, it's so important. Your language has been so crucial. I don't know if anyone else has picked this up, but like the use of the word skill, practice, tool, like this is an ongoing journey. I've been aware of dots and also like really trying to work on having a growth mindset for like a decade now. And the other night, like you just say, you kind of see yourself doing it. The other night, my partner and I never fight. Like in the 3 years we've been together, we maybe had like 2 little spiffs. And one of them was the other night, and I caught myself and I was like, and I was like upset and crying, and I was like, and I know I sound crazy, and I know this isn't coming across, I'm not communicating this well, but I don't know how else to do it. And I was like, sometimes you just got to remind yourself, like, it's a practice, but it's kind of wild when you can see yourself like engaging in those, that sober you, whether alcohol's involved or not, like there's that brain where you're a little bit nuts, and then there's that sober brain. Like when you're engaging in behaviors, your nuts brain is like, yeah, let's go wild, and like I'm invincible. But sober you is just kind of like, thought we were past this. Thought this was a teenage thing. What are we doing at 30 years old still? It's such a practice, right? Like it's just a skill set that.
And speaking of like tools and practice, like I think that's something we often take for granted. Our health, our relationships, like things like that we don't necessarily think we need to maintain or put effort or work into. We just kind of take it for granted. Like I'm fit-ish and healthy-ish and I'm fine. And then one day I get sick and it's like, ooh, okay. Like we don't think that we need to necessarily work on things until things go wrong. But actually it's just like we maintain our cars and our houses and our furniture and like we maintain everything else, but not ourselves and our relationships, because we just kind of take them for granted and we get complacent. But then they are the most important things. Like what's that quote or something that was like, um a a healthy man has, or a healthy person has many desires, but a sick one only has one. Like at the end of the day, if your health goes downhill or your relationships go downhill, all of a sudden everything else doesn't seem that important. But you've got to put that practice in and that work in when things are good too, not just when things are going bad. Or because inevitably they do at some point. Like if you're with someone long enough, if you're in a relationship with someone long enough, there will come times where it's not going to go well. We're not going to get along perfectly all the time. We're not designed to. Otherwise things would be pretty boring anyway. There will come times where we're going to have arguments. There will come times where um, we're going to say something that doesn't come out the way we intended. It will happen one way or another. We just, if we can understand each other enough in advance, it can really help. And it's not too late. Like I had a lady who came to one of my workshops once and she said, I wish I did this 2 years ago with my husband at the time, because maybe we would still be together if we had. And I remember that hit me like a ton of bricks, but I was like, at the end of the day, you know, you can't, some people, like my parents are very similar people. They're very similar communication styles. They were married for 24 years. They still split up. That just being similar and understanding each other isn't going to mean you're going to be together forever. I reckon the biggest thing is whether or not you're willing to work on it, and whether or not you're willing to keep learning and keep growing together and keep repairing. It's when someone doesn't want to anymore, then that's when um, that's when you kind of give up. Same thing with health, I suppose, whether you're willing to work on it and you're willing to, every time you kind of fall off the wagon or whatever, get back up and keep going. It's when you stop and go, okay, nah, I'm done. Then that's when the problems happen. You just be willing to keep working on it.
Well, I think that comes down to expectations, right? Like we talk so much about setting goals in life, and yet no one ever talks about what happens when you actually achieve them. Like I ran a marathon a few years ago, and it's a big accomplishment to run over 42 kilometers, it's like a bucket list item. It was for me, but I wasn't prepared for the day after I had done it. I'd spent years building it up in my head. I'd spent months training, and then it was over in 5 hours. And after that, I was like, do I run further? And I think it's just expectations. Like when it comes to marriage, when it comes to fitness, when it comes to work, like we expect the promotion or the anniversary or the weight loss to be the thing. And we forget that actually life is long, and ideally those things continue forever. Like when we sign up for a relationship or we sign up to work on our health, we're not signing up for 12 weeks of fun and fitness. It's like you're signing up for life. And the expectations need to be there, that you will fall off, that you will get into arguments, that like you will hopefully accomplish those goals. And then what?
I think that's actually such a brilliant point, that expectations, I've been doing a lot of kind of investigation, kind of research into that a lot lately because of like mindset and everything. Like expectations, I reckon, are one of the biggest things that it like makes or breaks your happiness, like it's how you experience life. That's that saying, I'll be happy when doesn't work, because when that thing happens, if you're putting your happiness on something external, one, that thing might not even happen, or two, if it doesn't go the way you thought it would, or even if it does, like it's not going to give you anything. The work is inside. Like if you, what is that? There are people out there are billionaires who are miserable, and there are kids in third world countries who are happy. It's all to do with their level of expectation and how they see the world, their perception. And I find that so interesting because I think that's one of the biggest things that trips us up. And I think in relationships too, like I've seen that so many times. I'm not married myself, but I have seen so many people who have got married and then gone into a kind of not depression, but like a lull of like, and now what? Like they assume that that's going to be the happily ever after. That's kind of what we get sold in movies and things. They got married and then they lived happily ever after, and then they realize a year later, oh, nothing's changed. And it's like they thought something would change just from getting married, but actually, yeah, like I think that's so interesting. It's how you think. And if you work to, like, that's what that thing is of, if you work, it's not achieving the goal, it's who you become in the process of
100%.
working towards that goal. It's who, like your own growth and what you've learned along the way. My favorite of all time, like kind of motivational like video thing or talk, is from Alan Watts, who says your life is not a journey. You're not trying to get to some end, but we get brought up to believe that. We go to school and they say you just got to pass this grade and then this grade, and then you got to go to university or college or whatever, and then you get a job, and then you got to make this quota, and then you get a promotion, and then you work all this time, you're chasing something, like how once this happens, then I'll feel good. And then he says you wake up one day midlife and you look around and realize I've arrived and nothing's any different, and you're kind of just like, okay. And then it's almost a complete opposite, like you plummet because you think, I've worked my whole life to this, and is this it? Like, is this what I was working towards? And I love how he brings it back to life was meant to be enjoyed. He talks about like music and a dance, and the whole point of the song or the dance is to enjoy the dance. It's not to get to an end. It's
Mm.
to enjoy the dance as you go, because otherwise you never know. Like you never know what's going to happen too. Like the world can completely change in a day. If there's anything we've learned in the last few years, the whole world can change drastically, very quickly. We're not guaranteed anything. We're not um, entitled to anything, but we think we are. It's almost like we think. I even heard something a while ago that hit me. There was a lady who said she has people come, or she was um, a pastor of some kind, and she said people come to her if they've had a terminal diagnosis or something like that. They come to her and say, "Just found out I'm going to die," and she said she has to kind of hold her tongue a little bit and not respond with, "You just realized that?" Like it's a harsh kind of way to look at it, but we are all going to at some point, but we almost
Yeah.
kind of forget that, and we just think we're going to live to old age and have a great life and everything's going to go how we imagine and we expect, but it doesn't so often. And if we're so stuck on that and so, our happiness depends on that, it can go so wrong if
Mm.
it doesn't pan out the way you think. um Sorry, I feel like I've gone on a bit of a tangent there, but I
I
love
love it.
talking about expectation. That is a
It's
big, big one. I think that's one of the best things you can work on for yourself, is being aware of what are your expectations. Like that's
mm,
what they say, that um, expectation versus appreciation.
mm,
Um, if you have this, and often when you have really low expectations of something, you get blown away by it and have a great experience. It's when we have really high expectations that often they don't get met, and then we get upset, which
mm.
seems bizarre, but we all do it. It's funny.
Well, speaking of, like, you've had a big event happen in the last 2 weeks, and you messaged me to say, "Holy shit, I've just broken the 200 follower mark." And you have literally gone from 200 followers to 60,000 pretty much in the space of like 14 days.
It has been insane. It's been, but again, very interesting to watch. I'm fascinated in how I am handling it and reacting to it. I'm like, this is interesting. Okay. There was like a week of panic. And like your message was so true when you said like your nervous system must be like
Pride.
right. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
so. I kind of in survival mode for that first week, because it was just like, what is going on? Like my whole life. Oh, and it sounds dramatic if someone's not on Instagram or doesn't care about social media or something like that. To them, they're thinking, well, it's not a big, you're making it a big deal. And my partner is that perfect example. He's not even on Instagram. And he looked at me and he was like, why is this affecting you so much? He's like, I don't get it. Why? It's just a video. Like it doesn't, it doesn't matter. And I was
Mm.
like, you don't get it. Like you really don't get it. But I was making it I was making it mean stuff, and as
Really.
you do, but I was like, it feels like my whole world has gone from just having a nice chat with a couple of people in a coffee shop to all of a sudden I'm standing on stage and millions of people are seeing my face and hearing my words, and that feels quite scary and quite vulnerable. And um, it, my mind has just been all over the place, but mostly good. Like, and that's why I'm so glad, I'm so fascinated in self-awareness and personal development and how my mind works, because otherwise I probably would have spiraled,
Mm.
and I would have defaulted back to my survival mode, which was probably either delete the video or cancel my Instagram account. Like that's exactly what I would have done in the past. And I had a girl comment something similar when I did a video about how I'm handling it. She said,
Mm.
I had a similar situation a couple of weeks ago. A video of mine started taking off and I freaked out and deleted it because I was so, anxious about what was happening. And I was like, that used to be me. Like, and I would have done that. I would have got very scared about, oh no, possible rejection, or people aren't going to like it, or people are going to have a go at me, or tell me I'm ugly, or like I just would have gone down that path, freaked out and retreated, and not just watched and to see where it would go. So it's been very interesting, but that's an example of if you put the work in and the practice in and the times where things are okay, then when big situations or life-changing events or things like that happen, you're just better equipped to deal with it. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect, or none of us are, but you're just going to feel like I felt like I had tools in a tool belt that were helping me deal with it. And
Mm.
it also allowed me to not, I'm kind of one of those people, I take everything very personally. I'm a very sensitive soul. I'm a bit of like an emotional sponge. So other people's emotions affect me. If someone tells me something and they're upset and they're crying, I'll start crying. Like it's not even, I don't even know this person, but I'll be right there with them. But I was able to almost kind of put a bubble around myself and just look at it objectively and be like, okay, everyone has a different perspective, everyone has a different opinion. That's cool, that's interesting, let's look at that. And I was reading through the comments, like there's so many comments, I can't even read them all, but some of them, like I'm like, wow, okay, that's how you took that, interesting. Like whereas in
Yeah.
the past I would have been like, oh my god, they don't like me. But I can look at it and be like, wow, okay, that's different, I didn't think of that. Or and it's funny how it's just shown me more how important our perspective is, because people have taken that message. It was, a message about life and death and what happens when we're gone and whether we're remembered or not. Some people took that really positively and refreshingly and was like, this
Some
is
people
really
took it
freeing.
very pessimistically.
Yeah, some people were like, wow, that was depressing, or that was, now there's no point to anything. And I was like,
Yeah.
interesting
Mm.
how people see it so differently. It's all your perspective and what you think of it. Like that is your life. Your perspective is your world. Like how you see the world. That is it.
There's two threads I want to pull on there. And the first I think I'll just tie up, and that's around, like you say, you just put this bubble on. That again is an example of like practicing the pause, of just stepping back and not self-sabotaging. Like as a business owner that uses social media for business, you kind of just hit the jackpot. And so if you deleted it, you would have self-sabotaged all of that effort you'd put in for years. And
Yeah.
it's funny how like we want to do that, right? That was kind of like one thread, but perception, oh my God. This week alone, so funny. I put out content around women's health, nutrition, strength training, specifically helping women that have like a significant amount of weight to lose or have yo-yo dieted and want to get off that train, right? Now, my history myself, I battled with eating disorders for years. We're talking like I nearly died. You could see the veins in my stomach. I was so underweight that I nearly died. I'm so surprised I'm still even here. And it was like a slow form of suicide because I'd become so depressed that I was like, well, if I just keep going, I'll vanish and no one will care. That sort of like tendency and depression then spiraled into bulimia and binge eating and exercise purging. Like I'd just try and burn it off. And it happened for years and years. Now, I have received in the last 2 weeks 2 separate messages. One from a woman saying, I really appreciate the content you put out. As a counselor, the approach that you share is so sustainable and kind and really resonates with me. And I'm sure you're helping so many people. And then I got another message that said, hey, your content's really dangerous. And I think that you're putting women at risk of developing eating disorders and harming them. And I don't know if you mean to create harmful content, but if you're open to having a conversation around it, like, now bear in mind, she doesn't even follow me. She'd unfollowed me because something in my content had triggered her. And yet there's all these other women who are like, you've helped me, whether I work with them in a professional manner or for free. Like, it's crazy how other people's perceptions of what you can say can be taken in 2 completely different ways. And you just kind of have to step back and go, I'm just the messenger. And also, do you think I came here to like cause more harm? Sharing a message about existentialism and how like truthfully, no one's going to remember us in a few decades, like a few centuries. We're going to be gone. Like none of this does, we're here to just enjoy it. Like this is it. But the fact that people have taken that and gone, God, depressing, what's the point? I give up. It's like, I think you're missing the point. I think you've taken something at face value and just run with your subconscious rather than getting curious about it and going, where's the good? Where's the true message?
That's such a good example of how, like perception, and two people can walk into one room, like two people can walk into the same room and see a completely different room. One person can walk in and think, wow, what beautiful windows, they let in this lovely sunshine and it's nice and warm, and I love the way that the light, dances across the walls or whatever. Another person could walk in and think, oh gosh, it's so bright in here, I hate it, it hurts my eyes, I need to, where are the curtains, why would they have windows like that, two different people can be in the exact same room and see it completely differently. And that's not to say that we can't ever be critical or observe things, that we don't have to like everything, but
Sure.
just be aware of that perception, be aware of, do we like experiencing that feeling of being angry or annoyed all the time, or do we like separating out, like looking at something and being able to go, okay, that's interesting, they see it like that, I see it like this. And we can't control how others react. That's something that is so I have to remind myself of that all the time. I just had a quote the other day that blew my mind, that was, our ability to feel and empathize with other people's pain doesn't mean it's our responsibility to fix it. And I thought, oh, like, yeah, if someone's upset, or I always feel like I have to solve that for them, or make it better, but sometimes, like, each of us are responsible for our own thoughts and our own perception. We can't control that, and we can't do anything about that. We can just keep doing our best and putting out there, having the best intentions, but sometimes, we're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And I think, as you're right, like as a business owner or someone who puts themselves out there a lot, it's so important to remember that we're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone's going to take something how we intend. And we talk about that a lot in the DOTS training, is knowing how your words will be received before you start talking. Like, if I have something I want to say, or I have a difficult conversation I need to have with someone that might, if I know it's going to have a potential to possibly start an argument or not go well, how can I best frame that so that they can understand what I'm saying and not get distracted with, like, how can I get that across in a way that hopefully will be received well? It might not. And if it doesn't, what can I then do to repair that? How can I best repair that? Because every single conversation we ever have is never they're not all gonna go swimmingly. We're not always going to get along. So how can we best how can we best deal with that, I think, is so important.
You got to separate yourself though too, right? Sometimes it's like you can do the best you can, and I choose to believe, like, we love a good quote. I don't know where I heard this, I don't know how I learned it, but the idea that everyone is doing the best that they can, even if it's not the best you think they can. And whether or not people are doing the best they can isn't for me to decide. But my God, my life is better if I brainwash myself to believe it. Like, we can only control so much. And then stepping back and going, delivered the message. I've told you you won't be remembered in a few years, or I've told you you need to eat this way to lose weight. And then how you perceive that, there's so much coloring that's going to go into how you hear that, and trying to understand, like, you can't please everyone at all.
And what's that one that's like, people they can only hear the message when they're ready to receive it? Like, at the end of the day, not everyone's on the same journey, and we're all in different parts of life and a lot of people are in survival mode. And sometimes they're not ready to hear things or work on themselves, and that's fine. And they might push that away. It might be, no, that's too much for me right now. I remember in the thick of the newborn baby stage, with my first, and I remember actually thinking to myself, there was a moment like I knew I wasn't thinking great, and I knew I wasn't doing well and with my mindset and all that kind of thing. And I just didn't care. Like I was like, I don't care. That's too hard right now. I just need to sleep for more than 2 hours. And then, like it was just, I knew that. And I was like, okay, but I'm not going to sit down and read a personal development book, or I'm not in that, I'm not in that stage right now. I'll get there one day, like I'll get back there, which I have. But in that moment, I wouldn't have been able to hear, not to say that I would react negatively to it, but it would have been too much for me for someone to come to me and be like, hey, let's work on you and how you are wired and da da da. I would have just been like, no, 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 I need sleep. Like I need sleep and I need food and basic human needs. So I think sometimes if people aren't ready to receive the message or aren't in a good headspace, it is what it is. We can't it might hit them 3 or 4 years later and they think, oh, actually that was quite helpful. Who knows?
So I've got a question for you then, because I think we can get into this whole of like, I want to read all the books, I'm going to listen to all the podcasts. And Alex Hormozy just calls this mental masturbation, which it is. It feels really good, but it's not actually getting you anywhere. Like you can learn and you can listen and you can absorb as much as you can, but when it comes to actually practicing and putting it into like real world scenarios, what would be your one piece of advice for someone that wants to just top level, like build better self-awareness? How can they go and this week practice one thing that can help them?
My biggest thing at the moment, it's funny, is leaning into what I'm resisting. Which, because I read, speaking of personal development books, I listened to the audio book of Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway a few weeks or months ago. And I loved it because I am very risk averse. Like I am, oh no, I don't know the unknown. It's too scary. I won't do that. I'll avoid it because then for fear of rejection or fear of it might go wrong. So I just won't do that. And I hold myself back so much because of that. Pure example is my social media and my business. I've been on Instagram on my business account for about 6 years and been stuck at 200 followers for 6 years because I never really put myself out there. Like I tried and I dabbled in it here and there, and then I'd run away and hide or give up or just stop for a while. And then I read the book, Feel the Fear, Do It Anyway, and I was following a lady on Instagram who talks about growing your Instagram and how to do it and making videos and things like that. And I was so nervous about it. And I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't like how I sound or how I look or whatever. And I remember seeing someone say, well, if you're a small business owner and you don't have a big marketing budget, you have to be the face of your business. Like you have to. No one else is going to do it for you. If you can't afford to pay someone else to do it for you, you have to do it. And you have to, everyone goes through that cringe phase, like where you're learning something new for the first time, where it doesn't always go very well, but you practice more and more and more, and then you get better. And then eventually you've, you're doing really well. So I just started making videos, putting it out there, and I was nervous and I was worried, but all of a sudden it just went boom. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm noticing now that I'm, as you say, like self-sabotaging, like I'm reverting back to, oh no, this is scary, this is unknown, this is too hard, this is too much, I just won't do anything. But instead, I'm leaning into that fear, feel the fear and do it anyway. Like I'm leaning into it, like I'm curious, okay, why am I resisting this? Why? What's the worst that could happen? Yes, 11 million people have seen my face, but it seems to have gone all right. Like what's the worst? So I think when we read all these books and we do all this self work, and then when it actually comes to put it into practice, you might feel nervous, and there might be something you're resisting. Get curious about that. Why am I resisting that? And lean into it, even though it might feel scary. That's where the growth happens. Literally, like that's where we often try to avoid the struggle because we're scared of what might go wrong. But that's where real growth happens, is when you lean into what feels scary. As long as it's not, something stupid, like it don't go believe you can fly off
Good
a cliff.
disclaimer.
And yeah. Just if it excites you and it's in the direction of where you want to go, or something that you want to work on, but it scares you, that's the good part. Like, you like lean into it and just see where it takes you, because you never know how it could go. You have no idea. Like, let go of the how. It just lean into what you want. And that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm very much pushing myself. Even getting like on this podcast, like part of me's nervous, like, oh, what if I say something someone doesn't like, or but I'm excited by it. I'm like, okay, cool, let's do it. Like, let's see where it goes.
Yeah. And also, so what?
Mm.
If
Yeah.
someone doesn't like us, turn it off. If you've gotten an hour and 3 minutes in, now's your chance to turn it off, So what?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty sound advice, and some good examples for people are, ditch the treadmill, pick up the weights, have the difficult conversation at work, tell that person how you really feel. If you feel scared and you feel anxious and you feel excited, you already know what happens if you don't do it.
Because fear is exhausting. Fear is so exhausting. Like, the fear of something is more tiring often than actually doing it. Like, you might put something off, put it off, put it off, put it off, and you spend so much time thinking about it that actually once you do it, it's like refreshing. It's like, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought. Like, oh, it's done now. Okay, I can move on.
Yeah.
The fear of it is exhausting.
It's beautiful. Alex Hormozy also says, like, people will take years to do the first hour of something.
Mm. Mm.
Like, imagine how far ahead you'd be if you just started today.
Yeah.
Yesterday would have been amazing, but the next best time is now.
Yeah.
And you keep putting it off, you just keep exhausting. Oh, I appreciate you so much. If people want to know more about you, where can they go?
My Instagram right now is the
Your big
hotspot.
Instagram.
So it's Inspire Affect with an A, at Inspire Affect. And I have an online course which I'm just about ready to launch. I'm coming very soon, so there should be details on that on the Instagram account very soon, which I'm very excited for, and that is very much leaning into feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna launch it. See where it goes.
Practice what you preach.
Very much. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will drop all of those links in the show notes. And like I say, if you want to find out what your dots is or your dots are, because you can be a couple of dots, I'll drop that in the show notes and you guys can do the quiz. But thank you so much for your time. I really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
you.
me. Yay.
And yeah, I hope everyone goes and checks you out.
Thanks so much.